Welcome back to Basic Bananas Radio, where we share tried and tested ways to grow your brand and get more customers. Everything from the latest in marketing and branding, right through to growing your team and creating an irresistible culture.
Hi, and welcome back to Basic Bananas Radio. I am so excited to share this chat with you that I just had with Jen Richardson, who is one of our beautiful members and such a powerhouse woman with so much wisdom and knowledge around financial literacy, a topic that I believe is really important for business owners to hear about, because one thing that we do is use our businesses to generate money and then invest that money to generate more wealth. So really excited to share this conversation with you. Let's jump straight in. Hey, Jen, so good to see you again today. I'm so happy to have this conversation with you.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to joining in the conversation with you and hopefully sharing some pearls of wisdom with your listeners.
Oh, I know you will because I've known you for about a year. You're one
Yeah.
of our members here in the Freedom Bunch, and every time I speak with you, I feel like I'm learning something new myself. And so I'm really excited to bring your knowledge to our listeners today.
Lovely. And that's reciprocal. Every time I talk to you, you are a wealth of knowledge and have helped me immensely in the last 12 months. So thank you.
I really appreciate that. And different fields. So you have such an incredible background. You are an accountant, you also are a financial planner and a mortgage broker. So all areas that have to do with money. And the thing that I love about this is that you come at money from all these different angles. And one of your focuses is to help business owners and women build wealth through financial literacy education. And
I do.
yeah,
I
I
do.
reckon where we should maybe start is something that I'm noticing is if I know that you specialize in working with women, and one thing that you and I we just discussed before is that often women and men have a little bit of a mindset thing going on about money. I know a lot of women in particularly that are just not very good with money, or maybe just have a bit of a almost like a bit of a negative emotion when it comes to money. So can we start there, and what do we need to uncover there?
Absolutely. The thing that I find is that women will put a block up and just tell themselves that they're not good with money or they weren't born with those skills, that money is maths and they're not good at maths and things like that. But of course, that's a mindset, and nobody is born knowing how to do money or how to build a financial future for themselves. It's all around education, and financial literacy isn't taught in our schools. So it's up to society, our parents, or yourself to go and find those out. So removing the mental blocks, I think, for women is so much harder than men. And, look, I deal with in my business here in the accounting practice, men and women, whilst my financial literacy program is designed for women. Men have a similar mental block, but they are much more forgiving of themselves and much more willing to learn and talk about money. Whereas I have women that just say to me, "You're so lucky you know how to deal with money. You're so lucky that you know how to build your financial wealth and look at your future." But it's not luck. It's just my training that I've had. And women that I've worked with, as soon as we take away that and just go, let's just take one step at a time. You don't have to solve the world today. They look at it from a different angle. And, that women are more than capable of looking after their money and building their own financial wealth. They just need the tools that they can use and put in place. And, it's about that old saying, teach a man to fish and he'll be forever able to feed himself. And some people are looking for the quick fix, of course, and that's no different to any industry. But it is just about finding that space and getting a different attitude towards money.
I love that so much. And while you were explaining that, I was just thinking and wondering, curious about whether, because women, as you say, generally, and hopefully that is changing, with the next generations, but I wonder if it's still a bit of remnants of, our past generations and my parents and maybe your parents, the man in a conventional relationship, the man was the provider and the money guy, and the woman was a bit more stay-at-home person. So I wonder if there's a bit of remnants there where it's like, oh, I don't really need to understand it. I don't, it's too complicated. Do you think that's where it's coming from a little bit?
It is. And even in my family, I grew up, my father looked after all the money in my family. You know, my mum just got her little, I think they used to call it housekeeping money back then. You know, every Thursday when dad got paid, mum would get handed the money to go and do the grocery shopping. And there was an expectation that men would always look after the money. And so I think history tells us that we've got to cut those ties. And, you know, I guess in those days, most people went into a marriage and they tended to stay in a marriage, whereas now we have a lot more independence for women, whether that's staying in a marriage or just being financially independent. It's a very different world we live in. But, you know, the history tells us that men were always there to look after the money in the family. And we hear all those myths all the time, don't we? That, you know, it's the man's job to look after the family financially, because if they're looked after financially, that's okay. Women look after the emotional side of the family and nurturing the children as they grow. And, you know, we hear the other myths that women are spenders, women can't save, women spend more on clothes than they should because they've got no control. And they are just myths. And, you know, I've seen men, and certainly my boys, you know, they're adult men now, but they've got mates that can't save, haven't got anything. So it's definitely not a women's thing. It's just
No.
education. Education is
And
key.
yeah, and I do want to get into where women can start. I do want to also note that the beautiful thing is that, and this is a mindset thing too, is that we women, we can do both. We can understand money. We can. I always say I love my money making babies. I love when money makes babies, and that comes through investing. So people like you know, explaining how to do that, and then us having the power and the confidence to do that. At the same time, we can also nurture our family, and it is this kind of taking care of the family also by almost empowering ourselves to understand the money bit too, so that we do feel safe and secure no matter what the future is holding. So given that that's, you know, something that we can all do, where do you normally start with someone if they are a bit like, oh, I don't know about this money thing, my husband or my partner has been doing this thing. Where should we start?
So for me, it's always starting with what's holding you back, because there is always something holding you back. And if that's fear, which it mostly is, people are scared to make mistakes. They're scared that they will get themselves into a worse position. They have a fear that they won't get the concepts. So I always start with, let's work on your money mindset. What's your fear around money? How do you feel about money? And of course, you know, Francesca, you would know that money mindset always starts when we're young. So it's where you will have that upbringing that, you know, you'd never get taught things. You see money as an argument in the household. So you do become fearful of it. And whether it's, you know, look, the household I grew up in was not a fear one. My father was never angry about money. We didn't ever get told we couldn't have things, but there was nothing surplus. And so the fear was a silent fear for me. It wasn't that I saw mum and dad arguing about money. It was more that I saw that we didn't have things that other kids had. We didn't miss out on anything, but my dad was very careful with the money. So when I got my own money and I started working in my teens, I would splurge everything I got, because all the years that I wanted the dress or the shoes or whatever that didn't come, all of a sudden I had my own money. So that was my money mindset that I had to overcome when I worked out, you know, where I was. And so I always start with, let's break down your money mindset. But then it is genuinely tackling where you are now, you know, and a lot of people will close their eyes to what situation they're in. So it genuinely is, let's find out what debt you've got. Let's find out what assets you've got, what money you've got, where you spend. And it's about making small steps. You know, it's a bit like I always say, you know, the diet industry tells you to go and starve yourself. And of course, you're not going to be able to stick to it. And money is the same. And nobody wants to not be able to enjoy life. Or, you know, you see those things all the time, that stop getting takeaway coffee on your way to work because that will save you, $1,000 a year. But if that's a thing that brings you joy or, makes the day easier, shout yourself that coffee, but find something else that you can put a savings in. So, there'll be very different circumstances for everybody. I've got clients that decided that they wanted their coffee, but they were quite happy to bring their lunch every day instead of buying their lunch. I've got other people that couldn't think anything worse than having a pre-made lunch, but they were quite happy to go without something else. So it's about finding what is unique for you and still being able to enjoy life. So it's small steps all the way, but it's knowledge. It's knowing where you're spending. And I always get everybody to do a budget. I don't love these budgets that say just put 40% into a spending account because it doesn't teach you habits. And so I get people to do a budget, but then you don't have to live with that budget because what you do is you then set up bank accounts. So one bank account is your day-to-day living so that between payday and payday, it covers, your transportation costs, your groceries and those sorts of things. And then we have another account that's set aside where you put money each payday ready for those bills that come through, like your mortgage, your insurance, your car rego, any of those regular bills. And then I always have an account that's for fun. And that's where you do your manicures, your pedicures, your shopping, your holidays, your weekends away, and all of those sorts of things. But by having the separate bank accounts, you know what you've got to spend and how much you can spend. So you've only got to look in there and if your everyday spending account, which is payday to payday, and you've got another week, you can just look in that bank account and go, okay, well, I don't quite have enough for this week. I need to find some savings. So you're only ever working on a small period of time. And, being able to watch what you spend for 1 week, most people can manage that because next week the pay comes in and you've got back to your fortnightly or your weekly thing. But it just means that you're not looking too far ahead. And it's those small steps that give you control over your money without feeling strangulated by it.
And I wonder, do you have you suggest an account for day-to-day living, groceries, things like that, another one for bills like insurance, etc., another one for fun stuff, holidays, beauty, massages, and I assume one more for investments? Would you?
I actually do 6 bank accounts. They're the 3 common ones. And then I do one that I call an emergency fund. So that's where you put some money away ready for when the car breaks down or kids need to go and get braces or those sorts of things. And then I have a long-term and a short-term savings. So the long-term savings can be your investments. And for me personally, my long-term saving is my superannuation and the investments that I hold outside of superannuation. My short-term savings is anything that I always say 12 to 18 months. So if you decide you want to go to Europe next year, that's where you will save for it, or you want a newer lounge or, whatever it is. So I always do the 6 bank accounts. I did do a coaching call with a lovely lady yesterday, and she actually is having 8 because she wants the long-term savings, but then she also knows that she wants to take the family to Europe next year. So she's got one savings account for that. And then she wants to get a new bathroom in 3 years. So that's a bit more. And then there's another one that they want to get a car in about 4 to 5 years. So I always say 6, but I wanted they're all offset against their mortgage. So it's working for them to save them interest on their mortgages. But by naming that account, she knows what she's working for. And when you've got goals, it makes it much easier to stick to your savings. So my long-term savings, as I said, is my superannuation and my investments, because that's just the stage I'm at in life. Somebody else, that long-term savings might be a deposit for a house. So it's all very unique to whoever it is. And that's the key to it. I think that you do everything based on what suits you and your needs.
Yeah, and I assume if somebody goes, oh, I don't really want 6 or 8 bank accounts, they could just do the basics, what suits them. It could be the day-to-day living. Could be groceries, transport, could even be insurance, car rental, all in one. Then you have the fun bucket. So I definitely think people should have a fun.
Oh, absolutely.
And I would say the savings. For me, if I just had 3, that would be it. I would put the day-to-day living, the fun, and then the investment one.
Yeah, and that comes down to each person and how controlled they are. I find people that don't have a lot of control over their money, the more bank accounts, the better.
Mm-hmm.
because, they know they can't touch this one because it is for, the holiday overseas or whatever it is. I've had people say to me, I don't have enough money to have six bank accounts. Whether the money's in one bank account or six bank accounts, it's the same.
Yeah.
And it does give you that control. Because if you jump onto your banking app and there's $1,000 in there and you're about to head out to the shops, you can bet there's not going to be $1,000 when you get back. But if you get on and you've got your day-to-day living account and there's only $200 left and there's another week to payday, you cannot go and spend that money because it's a mindset thing. The
Yeah.
whole lot of budgeting all comes down to mindset, and growing wealth is mindset, letting go of fear, letting go of things that block you, but also giving you the confidence that you have control of that. And the bank accounts give you that control.
So great. And with the first one, the money mindset one, I think that's such an important one. So what you say is start by maybe observing your beliefs around money, and they, as you say, they are shaped when we're young, and maybe then replacing some of these stories that we tell ourselves, these beliefs, with something that is more suitable. I'll give you a specific example. In my case, I grew up in a family where my mom was probably a little bit stuck with my dad because of financial reasons. So she probably would have left if she didn't have to stay because of financial reasons. And I remember even having these conversations with her where I would say, "No, come on, let's just go. We can live in a tent." As a young girl, I would have rather lived in a tent than in a place where it's a bit too much tension. And I think the belief that I formed back then is that I will never be in her shoes. I will always make sure that I'm in charge of my own money, that I will make my own money, that I will never rely on anyone. And that's what I've done. But I could also have formed a different belief back then. And luckily, that's the belief that I have adopted. I could also have formed a belief where I would have said, "Oh, I will only ever, be married or partnered with somebody who is kind and generous," and then I would have been, maybe in a similar situations or not. What I'm saying is that we can shape this story however we want, and I think it's
Absolutely.
just being aware of where
Yeah.
are we coming from. Yeah.
My nan actually told me when I was in my teens. Now, my nan only had two sons, and then I was the only granddaughter. And she was in a long term, my nan and pop lived to the day they die in a very happy marriage. But she said to me in my teens, always have a running away from home account that your husband doesn't know about, because then if you ever want to leave, you have the financial ability to do that.
Yeah.
And that has stuck in my mind since my early teens. And, that's why I started my business, because
Yeah.
when I got married and had children and I didn't want to go back into the corporate world, and I thought to myself, those voices of my nan from when I was about 13 or 14 rang
Yeah.
true. So I started my business from home with three little babies, because I knew that then if I ever wanted to leave my husband, and I am still happily married, but I knew
Yeah.
I could leave and I wasn't bound by, I've got no income, I've got three young children, and that has always stuck with me. And I always say it to all the young girls that work for me, make sure you've got a running away from home account and a credit card that your husband doesn't know about.
I don't know about the not know about. I actually just had a really cool discussion with one of my closest friends who was in a situation where his partner had a running away from home account, and he was not happy about that. I think it caused more issues than actually if there
Yeah,
would have been more honesty. But hey, everyone do whatever you need to do
yeah.
in terms of.
My husband always knew I had it, and I would always
Yeah,
say,
I
I'm
think
putting that money into my running away from home account.
I
And he
think
would
that's really
joke.
cool. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's really
yeah.
cool. What else? Where else do we need to go? What do you need people to know about financial
I
literacy?
think for women, it's about looking forward. I mean, we always start by looking back and working on your money mindset, but looking back at what has happened in the past for me is just about awareness. It's never about punishing yourself or, saying that you've done something wrong, because you can't change the past. You can only ever change your future. So once you've worked on the past stories that you have, it's about looking forward. So I'm very much a goal setter. I live my whole life by setting goals. Sometimes they're a little bit stretched and, I set myself up for failure, but I'm also a believer that if you stretch yourself and you get partway there, you're better than what you were before.
Yeah.
So setting goals. But the thing that I find with most people, and particularly women, because we are very, um, we want to be positive. A lot more women are not so realistic as men as far as, it comes to setting goals and things, because men are quite happy, I find, more living in the moment than women do. We want a better world for ourselves and our children. And so setting goals, but that achievable. And I always say to people, you should have some very short-term goals, like just this month, this is all I want to do. And they've just got to be small steps, because if you can say to yourself, I'm going to save $100 this month and put it into a savings account or into an investment or pay down some debt, you will achieve $100. And then when you get to the end of the month, it's that real, warming feeling that you've achieved what you wanted to achieve. So it gives you the catalyst for the next month. You might go, well, I'm going to try for $150 next month. And so setting those small targets help you achieve the bigger goals. But I always say, we always overestimate what we can do in a day. We underestimate what we can do in a year. So look to where you want to be in a year's time, but then break it down to those small achievable goals. But, we all know the statistics that women live longer than men. Women have a lower pay than men typically. We retire in a far worse financial position than men. Our superannuation is never what we need it to be. And of course, we retire with far less in superannuation than men, but we have a longer lifespan, technically, under statistics. So we actually need more in our super than what men have. So working on building your superannuation or your investments is a really big part of giving you that financial security for when you're older. And it's the small steps. Everybody says, oh, I'll wait till I get rid of the mortgage, or I'll wait till I get rid of that credit card debt, or I'll wait till, the kids have left home. And you're better off just to start with those small steps, because of course, compound interest has a huge effect on the end result. So it's about learning those little skills, not the looking for the great big thing that's going to save your world, because it's not coming. It's those little small steps that will get you into a far better financial position. But my message is also to the men of this world. If you've got a mother, a sister, a daughter, or a granddaughter even, teaching them financial literacy is teaching them a skill that will live far beyond you and your legacy for those women in your life. And I think that's a really important thing. Men, particularly, I find men that have got daughters are very much, how do I make my life better for my daughter? And so giving those financial literacy skills and showing them that it is possible, and talking to the women in your life about money, instead of it being, oh, I'll just fix that up, don't worry about it. It's the everyday conversations that actually make a difference in their lives. They learn that this is how you pay a bill. This is how you start to build your own wealth, how you invest, because investing is scary for some people. It is, you see on the news that the share market's gone down and all of a sudden everybody panics, but the educational side of it is that there's ups and downs of it all. So it's just around that financial literacy, and, financial knowledge builds financial strength for people.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I've got two daughters. They're only 2 and 4, but I already have conversations with them about this. And I remember my partner not long ago, he said, hey, should we just, I've already got a bank account for them. And he said, should we just put money in for them like every month, so that, in 20 years they have a deposit for something? I said, no, I want them to understand that, where money comes from, it doesn't grow on trees. I want them, and of course I will support them, but I want them to understand where money comes from and how you can make money, whatever it is, by doing chores or whatever the deal is. And then that's how they earn money, and I can show them how to invest their money. This is super confidential and I haven't told my mom, but my mom gave them a birth gift, $1,000. And she said, and my mom has not got any financial literacy, and this is the first time I'm sharing this obviously publicly, but it's fine. And she said, this is for them to put into a bank account, which I did, but then I also invested it. I bought shares, and I just said, hey, and she doesn't know, but I said to myself, and I made a note, I said, hey, they both have $1,000. If it stays in a bank account for them, it will go up slightly, hardly anything in Australia. No matter what, they will get the $1,000 if I lose all the money. But already it's gone up by 20%. Now the compounding interest that you say with the shares that I bought Nvidia, And you can see that what you talk about is with the compounding interest. If you just go, if you have no idea about all these numbers, go into ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm putting $100 into my super or into an investment that will go up about 10% per year. How much are those $100 in 10 years? And you will be surprised.
I know, I know. It's an interesting that you say that about your mum. My parents, when all their grandchildren were born, bought shares for them for their 18th and
Oh,
their
that's so
21st.
cool.
And
Really?
I did the same for my children. My kids have a share portfolio. Now, my kids are in my early 20s. They have a share portfolio ready to buy a house now of nearly $140,000
No way.
just from putting, and it wasn't a huge amount of money. Believe me, it wasn't. All I did was every year on their birthday, I would put $365, a day, $1 a day, and
Incredible.
I would keep buying shares, and I've just had them being reinvested, and it has just grown. And so on their 18th, my mum and dad gave them a little note, and that's, this is how much your share portfolio is worth. And they're only allowed to cash it in for a house deposit, but it's a great start.
Yeah. And
You
they
talk about
understand.
your,
Yeah.
yeah, and you talk about your girls. I had three boys. And my eldest, one time I was at the shops and he asked, could he have something? And, it was getting close to lunch. So I didn't want him, might have been a donut or something like that. And I said to him, the story that most of us say is, I haven't got any money. And I thought that would be okay because we're going home for lunch. And of course he goes, oh, you just go to that machine over there and it gives you money. And I thought straight away, oh my God, I've got to start his financial literacy. So I
Absolutely.
changed that story. Then I never said for them from that day that I don't have that money because that was a negative mindset. But I
Yeah.
changed that to, we're going home for lunch and then I started a little, felt bored and I drew up squares. So when they did homework, they got to move their little thing along. And when they got to certain spots on the board, they would get some money and they had a piggy bank and they'd put it in. And then once a year, we'd open up the piggy bank and we'd count it and we'd take it to the bank. And it was that educational stuff that they realized that there was a saving thing. And when we went on holidays every year, they would be able to keep half of what they saved, and that was their money to ride their bike around to the caravan park shop to buy what they wanted. So they learnt very early on the benefits of saving and that
Uh,
what it gave them. And so my kids are great savers. They've always, got money there and they've got their goal, which is a house deposit. And I put that back to they were 2 and 3 when I started talking to them about money and giving them a really positive mindset around money, not just talking about we can't afford it, we haven't got that money, that's too expensive. Those words have never been said in my house since that day.
So powerful. So powerful. And I think just having those open conversations at home and I guess showing them how it works and for your kids to see that, that 100 grand or whatever, that they can see how much was invested. It was, little
Nothing.
compared to what it is now. So for them,
Yeah.
because I didn't have that knowledge in my 20s. If I had had that knowledge in my 20s, I would be retired.
Mm,
But you
me
can start at
too.
any age. I'm in my 40s. I started probably in my 30s to understand it and myself and be exposed to people who understood what's going on. And now I would say I'm very proficient in investing. But if I had known that in my 20s,
I
imagine
know.
that, that's such a head start.
Yeah.
So
Look,
really
I've
cool.
got a money background and I didn't know it in my 20s because even with my degree and what I do for a living, it's not personal finance. It was all around how do you make businesses grow? How do you increase their gross profit margin and all of those sorts of things. So I had to take a flip and relearn different processes. And that came from not having what I wanted to have. And, as I said, my upbringing wasn't a wildly, argumentative house about money. There was never an argument between my mum and dad about money, but I still didn't learn those skills. And I taught myself in my 30s, and it was because I needed to.
So good. Where can people find out more about you? I know you've got a website and you've got a program that you're about to launch again, which is Got Money Honey.
It
Where would you
is.
like to send people?
So our website there where you can register is jenrichardson.co. The female financial literacy part of that is Got Money Honey, and the new course that I've got is starting in middle of August, and it's called My Money Makeover, and it's a 8 week, but 12 weeks of access to me. So we do a Zoom call where you can ask me any questions, run things past me, and it is literally, I hold your hand all the way through. We work on you, as I said, your money mindset, how to pay down debt, looking at your own money personality, because some people are real savers and other people are spenders, and setting up how you save for things depends on whether you're one of those. So if you hate debt and you pay debt off really quickly, we work at strategies to get yourself into debt to build your future, because you'll pay that down. So it's definitely a guided one. It's not buy the course and do it yourself, because you can do that on Google, but it is a weekly Zoom call with me where you get to ask all the questions. I can give you the guidance, the hand holding, everything that needs to get done.
So good. I really appreciate that you're running this program. I think it will change so many lives, and then the people that are doing their peers, their kids' lives too. So it's like a real ripple effect. We'll post all the links to the program into the show notes also. And again, thank you so much. Thank you for this really awesome conversation.
You are more than welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. I'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.
To get more from Basic Bananas and to learn new ways to grow your business with clever marketing, visit basicbananas.com.